Good morning, distinguished speaker, dear participants. Welcome to the UfM Regional Dialogue Meeting of Women Empowerment. Today, it's a key milestone for our work on the road to the preparation of the next ministerial declaration on women empowerment expected in 2022. Today, we will focus on the main outcomes and key findings of the regional progress that we drafted with the contribution of the gender focal point of the countries of the UfM. We will present also the main policy recommendations and capacity building actions that can improve the reporting exercise next year. I will discuss about it later on. So without further ado, let me introduce our distinguished speakers for the opening session. I would like to introduce first our representative of the UfM co-presidency from Jordan, Dr. Hamad Abu Haider, and he has been very supportive since last year in all the steps of our regional dialogue process. So, Dr. Abu Haider, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mana. I will be delivering my speech in Arabic. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سعادة السيدة أولغا غونزاليس ممثلة الاتحاد الأوروبي الرئاسة المشتركة للاتحاد من أجل المتوسط. سعادة السفير جون جريتش نائب الأمين العام للاتحاد من أجل المتوسط.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to all of you. For me, it's a great pleasure to be with you today as a representative of my country, Jordan, for this important regional dialogue dealing with follow-up to the ministerial process and the recommendations stemming from the fourth ministerial declaration of the Union for the Mediterranean on enhancing women's role in society. Allow me to thank the General Secretary for following up on the ministerial process. At the same time, I would like to underscore the importance of the Marrakesh, Paris, Barcelona meetings, especially the fourth ministerial meeting in Cairo. Ladies and gentlemen, the ministerial conclusions are a political document which is very important, which we should observe and enforce in order to ensure equal opportunity for both genders, to empower women in the Mediterranean. There are still many women who still cannot enjoy their rights to freedom, to basic freedoms, and who cannot have the same opportunities in the workplace. There are still discriminatory laws regarding women. Ladies and gentlemen, the regional dialogue, which takes place today, is happening in a very special point in time because we're still under the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. And its impact is substantial, especially in fragile countries which are in conflict, especially in the Mediterranean region. Most world countries give absolute priority to their citizens' health and security. And for that reason, budgetary policies in this regard are important. At the same time, major efforts have been made to adjust economies in the context of the pandemic. For this reason, many countries have taken drastic measures, which has created problems in households given financial resource problems, sometimes the interruption of some members of the family's economic activities. The propagation, the spread of the pandemic has had repercussions for women. Consequently, we must work to protect women. There is a lot of many economic and health considerations to be considered. At the same time, we must be concerned with protecting women against violence. Ladies and gentlemen, in spite of the challenges I just mentioned, the co-presidency of the Union has followed up the ministerial deliberations stemming from the fourth ministerial declaration of the Union for the Mediterranean from 2020. 4 meetings took place in 2021, which I was honored to attend as a representative from my country, Jordan. 15 countries presented their national reports, and those working groups led to a capacity building plan, a statistical capacity building plan in terms of data collection, statistics collection. Today, the most important results from this report will be presented, and in spite of the challenges we are experiencing in the Mediterranean region, particularly in the southern Mediterranean, we can see that remarkable progress has taken place in legislation and national policies having to do with women. At the same time, there's going to be a major meeting next year in the second half of the year. Allow me to conclude by highlighting the important efforts of Mediterranean countries to empower women and to consolidate progress in that area. The construction of a stable and inclusive society requires women and girls to have full rights, and I would like to reiterate my thanks to the Union for the Mediterranean. My heartfelt thanks to all of you.
As I said at the beginning, I would like to really thank you for your support, not only in terms of UfM co-presidency, but also for the effort devoted to draft the country progress report for our regional report. I would like now to give the floor to the EU co-presidency. Mrs. Olga Martin Gonzalez, she coordinator of gender equality policies for DG NEAR at the European Commission. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Good morning to all. It is really a pleasure to be here today with you. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge, to the Union of Mediterranean and its partners for the completion of this important, second report that focus, the progress that has been made already, but most importantly, makes gender responsive policy recommendations that will guide, the next ministerial declaration. it is important, I mean, to remember that gender equality and women's empowerment are core priorities for the European Commission. And our DG NEAR is really committed, I mean, to promote, I mean, gender equality in all the dimensions of the words at all levels, at policy level, at program level, etc. And this has been reflected, I mean, in several documents, I mean, policies and programs that we have for the external actions. As for example, in the latest, I mean, in the joint communication of the renewed partnership in the Southern neighborhood that established, I mean, and acknowledged, I mean, the need to increase the action on gender equality, supporting, I mean, the economic empowerment of women, encouraging also their participation, I mean, in the public life and politics, and also the elimination of violence against women and girls. So the EU has reaffirmed, I mean, the centrality of gender equality, also with the adoption of the new Gender Action Plan 3 for the external actions that it was adopted, I mean, last year, and it covers the period until 2020 until 2025. Where it was reconfirmed the commitment that we have that at least 85% of all the new external actions will have a gender equality as a significant or as a principal objective. And at least 5% of those actions should have gender equality as a principal objectives. This is in accordance to the OECD gender marker, and the target is we need to reach by 2025. At DG NEAR, currently we stand like around 61%. So we really need to step up our efforts in order to reach, I mean, the target. Also the financial instrument, I mean, DIKI, I mean, also established, I mean, the same targets in line, I mean, with the Gender Action Plan 3. I would like to give you briefly an update of the Gender Action Plan 3 that provides, I mean, our strategic guidance after 1 year of the implementation. I mean, it has 5 main pillars. The first one is regarding, I mean, the EU engagement on gender equality as a cross-cutting priority at all levels, at policy level, political programming work. And in this regard, I mean, we are going to continue, we are going to follow a 3-pronged approach. So we had to combine in a systematic manner, I mean, gender responsive mainstreaming, but also with targeted actions and policy dialogue in all the countries. The second pillar is regarding the promotion of the EU engagement at different levels, at multilateral, regional, and country level. So in this regard, I mean, one of the new novelties of the Gender Action Plan 3 is that has been translated into context-specific and tailor-made operational framework under the senior management leadership and responsibility. This is called the country level implementation plans. So for the moment we have received from the southern neighborhood, I mean, we've received, I mean, the CLIP is called an acronym, I mean, Palestine, Morocco, Jordan, Lebanon, a draft from Syria. We are still waiting, I mean, for the others, but this document is very important because it has been done, I mean, in coordination and cooperation among the European actors that they are present, I mean, in the country, but also with other key stakeholders and national authorities. And civil society or organizations, they have also participated, I mean, in this regard. So this document reflects the priorities that has been selected, I mean, in the countries, and it has been based in a gender analysis, in an updated gender analysis, where reflect, I mean, which are the needs, I mean, of the countries and the root causes of inequality. So besides, I mean, the gender, country gender analysis, I mean, we have to do as well, I mean, regional analysis, and also sector gender analysis needs to be done for the priority sectors that will be selected in each of the in each of the countries. For example, in Lebanon, I mean, they selected, we have 6 priorities and they selected 3. Working on issues on gender-based violence, the promotion of economic and social rights, and women's political participation, for example, in Palestine, all except sexual and reproductive rights. So the third pillar that we have is regarding, I mean, the areas of engagement that we have now 6. We used to have 3 under the former Gender Action Plan. So the new 2 areas are the ones that deals with the green transition and the digital transformation, because these ones were selected under the current EU gender equality strategy for the EU, and also women's peace and security. It has been integrated for the first time into this new gender action plan. The 4 pillar that we have of the gender action plan is regarding, I mean, leading by example. We used to call it the institutional cultural shift, because we consider that it's important. I mean, we need to have a gender responsive and gender balanced leadership at all levels. I mean, at political level, but also at a management level. So in this regard, we are going to build, I mean, the capacities of the managers, and this is going to be mandatory, I mean, for all managers, and this will be done throughout the period of the Gender Action Plan. And the last pillar is regarding, I mean, the reporting and the communication of results, and putting in place a monitoring system in order to increase, I mean, the accountability, to ensure transparency, but also to access to information. So in this regard, I mean, sex-disaggregated data and gender data and the selection of gender responsive indicators is really key in order to have an informed, effective policy making, I mean, and also for the program planning and monitoring. So we are going to do an annual reporting in some of the pillars, not except the thematic. The thematic will be done, will be monitored in 2023, and then we will have a final evaluation in 2025. So in order to be successful, I mean, with the implementation of the Gender Action Plan, as I mentioned, I mean, we need to have gender responsive leadership at the different levels, sufficient in-house capacity, but also we need to systematically integrate sex-disaggregated data, conduct gender analysis at different levels, country level, regional level. We need to make a correct use of the gender marker when we are doing the programming, but also very important, we need to have a close dialogue and cooperation with the member states, with civil society organizations and other key stakeholders, such as European for the Mediterranean, in order to learn from others, but also to join efforts and create more synergies. So I would like to conclude, I mean, just transmitting again, I mean, our appreciation to all stakeholders that have participated in this progress report, because we really need available and accessible and reliable data in order to design, better designed, I mean, national and regional policies, I mean, strategies that really select, I mean, the key priorities in the country in order, I mean, to advance the declaration and also the shared vision that we have in the region. We have supported, I mean, in these years, in the past, translated the ministerial declaration action plan into tangible actions, and we will continue to do so, I mean, in the next year. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would also mention the fact that we will really rely on this close cooperation with DGNIR and the EU delegation in order to be sure what we are going to propose in the framework of the next ministerial declaration will be also in line with the priorities that have been identified at country level, thanks to the work that the European Commission is doing in each country. And we will be really eager to have access to the data and plans that each country is planning to put in place. Thank you very much for your contribution, very much appreciate. And now I am pleased to give the floor to our Deputy Secretary General of Social and Civil Affairs Division at the UfM, Ambassador John Paul Gresh. Ambassador, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. You have to unmute yourself. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I salute the co-presidencies of the Union for the Mediterranean, Dr. Abu Hada, colleagues, and Ms. Martin Gonzalez, distinguished participants. It is indeed a privilege for me to be addressing you on the occasion of the UfM Regional Dialogue Meeting on Women Empowerment. The economic slowdown resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated the vulnerability of women and youth in the MENA region, considering that employment amongst these groups was already particularly high before the pandemic. The youth population is expected to grow by 40% to almost 600 million by 2030. Up to 80% of young people active in the region work in the informal sector, and they are also more likely to be under temporary contracts, often in sectors that have been severely hit by the crisis, such as travel, tourism, and restoration sectors. It is estimated that women in the larger Arab world will lose approximately 700,000 jobs because of the outbreak. The COVID-19 pandemic has also accelerated the ongoing digitalization of production processes and adoption of digital technology across businesses. Indeed, digital technologies can significantly facilitate access to higher education and VET, and ultimately enhance skills acquisition and employability of youth and women. In the MENA region, the share of women in professional and technical jobs is estimated to double by 2030 through digitalization, online platforms, and entrepreneurship. However, the enhancement of women's digital skills and access to technology is a necessary but not a sufficient step. Despite representing 34% to 57% of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM graduates, and outperforming boys in digital skills, few MENA women pursue their careers in STEM occupations or entrepreneurship. Structural gender issues, including limited access to finance, network and information, lack of mentoring and role models, social norms and gender stereotypes, combined with a digital gender gap, threatens to exclude women from the fourth industrial revolution. In recent years, women were still 20% less likely than men to have a senior leadership position in the mobile communication industry. Distinguished participants, there is a need for policies and programs that incorporate economic, social, and cultural aspects to truly achieve gender equality, and that these are not only isolated actions tackling single issues on the ground. Ensuring social protection for all should be, shall we say, a main entry point for gender equality in the next few years. Following this inclusive and comprehensive vision, the UfM member states have always put gender equality and women empowerment at the heart of our agenda. This agenda was notably endorsed at the 4th Ministerial Conference on Strengthening the Role of Women in Society in Cairo in November 2017 through 4 priority areas. Number 1, increasing women's economic participation. 2, combating violence against women and girls, including conflict and post-conflict contexts. Strengthening women's access to leadership positions in public and private sector. And 4, combating gender stereotypes and fighting against social norms that hinder the full participation of women. In the Cairo UfM Ministerial Declaration 2017, the 43 UfM countries made strong commitments to promote women's equal participation in 4 priority areas and agreed to establish a follow-up mechanism backed up with indicators to monitor progress, to evaluate the gender gap, and to provide recommendations to policymakers and stakeholders in order to improve the impact. In 2020, the UfM launched the first intergovernmental monitoring mechanism on gender equality. In 2021, the gender national focal points of the 42 UfM member states and the gender regional international organizations on a voluntary basis provided the gender country progress reports. The result analysis lead to the elaboration of the second UfM regional progress report on women empowerment after 5 years. Distinguished participants, the report will provide the technical inputs for the elaboration of the next UfM ministerial declaration expected to be adopted in the last quarter of 2022. Among the main outcomes of the report, let me stress a few relevant elements. Gender equality continues to represent a common goal for all UfM member states to recognize its importance for a stronger and more sustainable economic, social, and political development of the region, especially in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Important progress in achieving gender equality was made in the region since the launch of the UfM regional dialogue process on women's empowerment in 2015. Legal frameworks in many countries were reinforced. New programs and policies were developed in order to increase women's participation in political and economic spheres and also protect women from gender-based violence. The UfM member states have undertaken important efforts to legally protect women's rights in all aspects of life. The process of definition of national gender equality strategies has become a common practice amongst the majority of the UfM countries. Development of an effective dialogue with civil society, academia, and other stakeholders was given a greater importance. Women's economic empowerment continues to represent one of the regional priorities. Despite initial progress, the COVID-19 crisis has had a retroceding effect on the economic situation of women and has clearly demonstrated a need for a stronger commitment from the countries in the protection of women's rights. The increase of women's participation in public life can be clearly observed. The situation is more mitigated in the domain of economic leadership, where women continue to struggle to break the glass ceiling. However, in both cases, binding gender quotas demonstrated their efficiency in raising levels of women's participation. Violence against women and girls, and its most recurring form of intimate partner violence, continue to be a major issue in the region. Vulnerability of the situation of IPV victims has increased since the beginning of the pandemic, when many countries registered spikes of domestic violence. After initial difficulties caused by lockdowns, many countries in the Euro-Mediterranean region improved their mechanisms of victim support within very short timeframes. Distinguished participants, the outcome of the UfM Regional Progress Report, even with all its limits, would not have been achieved without the full country's support. We should not lose the momentum to build upon the regional report in order to prepare the key contents for the next ministerial declaration that should be adopted in the fall of 2022. This first exercise is only one step in a more long-term process that the UfM will keep working on during next year. The UfM countries should make a step forward at both national and regional level to consolidate the economic and political participation of women, both in private and private sectors, to improve the educational and vocational system, as well as to reduce the digital gender divide. The pandemic has confirmed the need for reliable data systems to support transparent and effective decisions. Gender disaggregated data are essential to identify the inequalities, to better target the public policies to increase women economic empowerment, fight violence against women, and challenge the social norms and the gender stereotype, leaving space at the same time for cultural diversity. Indeed, we plan to reach out in the coming weeks to countries' contributions in order to cover also the other indicators set up in the monitoring mechanisms adopted in 2020, while in parallel also to contribute to the drafting of the next ministerial declaration. From our side, we strongly reaffirm our commitment to push forward gender equality as one of the key priorities of the UfM member states for the next year, encouraged by the fact that this was also stressed by the 42 UfM member states during the recent UfM Regional Forum last November. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you for your word. And I would like also to highlight as among the key outcomes of this first reporting exercise, the big effort carried out by all the countries in data gathering. That is not an easy task, taking into account the limited availability of data, but also the need for boosted interinstitutional cooperation in terms of data gathering and data analysis. We will later on discuss about the key specific finding and possible policy recommendation. But as you said in your intervention, overall, if compared to the last 5 years when we published the first regional progress report, a lot of positive steps have been adopted in all the region, in all the UfM member countries. So certainly the relevance of the women agenda is a priority for all the countries. Thank you again. And we will now go to the session 1 of our event. And I wanted just to clarify for all the participants, also the one who are following us on the YouTube channel, that the objective of today's regional dialogue meeting is to present from one side not only the finding of the report and the policy recommendation, but also the lesson learned from this first reporting exercise that is a pilot project, because there are a lot of things that work effectively, but there are still room for improvement, and we will hear from the gender focal point which are their experience, good practice, but also suggestion. Then we will discuss about the policy recommendation that have been proposed, and then we will also discuss about the fact that in order to improve this reporting exercise, we will need also to work on strengthening the capacities of the national institution. And we will present the work program for the next year with this main milestone in our mind, that is the next ministerial declaration that will be the one after 5 years, taking into account that in the middle of these 5 years, we face the big crisis of COVID-19 virus. So I'm going now to give the floor to my colleague, Dr. Eva Widlak, who will present the main findings under the 4 priority areas that Ambassador Gret described, and more in particular for the 6 indicators that were analyzed. I'm talking about 6 indicators out of 20 that were adopted in July 2020. Last year, in the regional dialogue meeting, we decided to go for a first pilot report exercise covering 6 indicators. And during 1 year, we have been working with the network of a gender focal point at their national institution in order to gather the data, in order to analyze the data, and to consolidate the main finding in a regional progress report. This is the first step, and we will keep working to cover the remaining 14 indicators during 2022. I'm now giving the floor to Eva, who will also moderate this session, where we will have also 3 speakers, and we will introduce them later on. Eva, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Dear ambassadors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor and the privilege of being here with you today. So as Anna announced, in this session, we will speak about the when we speak about the legal framework, well, we have to notice that there has been an important progress in the past 5 years. All the UfM member states embed gender equality provisions in their constitutions and supreme laws. And additionally, almost all of them expressly forbids discrimination in all its forms. However, the biggest challenge is the enforcement of the existing laws and the fight against gender stereotypes, especially those that impede women from acceding to leadership positions. At the international level, all the UfM member states have ratified the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. However, almost all of them indicated some remarks, which basically means that all the articles are not taken into account. And the situation is a little bit complicated if we speak about the Istanbul Convention, because it was signed by all the EU member states. However, 6 countries still haven't ratified it, and 1 withdrew from it. If we speak about the efforts to mainstream gender into the work of legislative bodies, we have to notice special efforts, especially among the European countries, to undertake these efforts in capacity building, in gender-sensitive trainings, adoption of gender-sensitive budgets and budget strategies. If we speak about women's participation in economic life, we observe a general trend in the past 5 years of the increase of the women's employment rate. However, in some countries, we noted a decrease, especially in rural areas. However, I would like to put it in the context. We have to notice as well that this decrease in women's employment rate was also accompanied by a decrease in men's employment rate. Work-life balance has been detected as an essential element to achieve gender equality in the workplace. In consequence, many countries pursued their efforts to ensure best conditions, so especially so maternity does not represent a significant cost for women's professional development. If we speak about the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, we have to observe an increase in women's unpaid work, largely because of the closure of schools and the move to online schooling. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, employed women in the European Union spent almost 4 hours per day on unpaid care, whereas employed men spent around 2 hours and a half per day. In July 2020, these numbers rose for employed women with children to more than 7.5 hours per day, and for employed men with children to 4 hours and a half. And a similar trend was observed in the MENA region. If we speak about women's entrepreneurship, we have to observe that the Euro-Mediterranean region is below the global percentage of women-owned and women-led businesses. And it is the same situation for new women's established companies. So we can see that here we still women still meet some barriers, and of course many factors can be proposed, but one of the principles can be a limited access to loans that does not allow to develop quickly their commercial activity, also and maybe especially by the persistence of gender stereotypes that undermine women's efforts. As for women's leadership and decision making, well, improving women's access to leadership positions has been one of the major priorities for the UfM countries. Of course, because gender equality in leadership is a matter of fairness and is essential for promoting democracy and effective execution of its principles. So when we speak about women's presence in parliaments, we can observe a strong dichotomy between the UN member states, where women in average occupy 1/3 of the seats in national parliaments, and the countries of the East and South Mediterranean, where these rates are significantly lower. When we speak about women's presence on board, here also we can see strong differences. However, in the European case, we have to mention binding quotas. So several countries, if I'm not wrong, 11 countries in the European Union have already applied binding quotas in politics and on corporate boards. And these countries has observed a significantly higher level of women on boards, and their increased rates are also much faster. As for violence against women and girls, we have to notice an increase of social awareness and a multiplication of efforts on behalf of national structures in order to provide social, economic, and legal support for women who suffer this kind of violence. Here in the PowerPoint, I specified intimate partner violence because it was the indicator we studied in this year report, but of course these efforts were much larger. We have to notice the strong impact, the strong spikes of intimate partner violence during the COVID-19 pandemic. So during the first phases of the lockdowns, usually the countries didn't know very well how to respond to this aggravated situation. However, quickly new programs and policies were put in place in order to help victims of this violence. So now, if we pass to the second part of this presentation, which is about challenges in data gathering, I would like to speak first of all about main cross-cutting challenges that we have met during this exercise. First of all, despite significant efforts and progress in the matter, gathering of gender data still represents a major challenge. We still had some difficulties to collect data and to have the full image of the situation. I also have to stress the difficulties we had to compare the situation with the one in 2006, mainly because the first report contained less data, and of course it is understandable because the process of data collection was less developed, so it was an important issue. We also have to notice strong differences in the level of monitoring of gender-related indicators between the UfM member states. So even if even national reports, we received 15 of them, even if in the ones that we received, some data were basically missing. When we speak about this data gathering report, we cannot forget the impact of the COVID-19. We know that women were very strongly impacted by the pandemic, and we start to have the first research on the matter. However, we still miss the full image. So probably we'll still need to wait for some time in order to properly analyze this impact. And the last, yet a very important point, which was the scarcity of qualitative information. We mainly received quantitative information, which is of course the basis for this exercise. However, we missed this qualitative data in order to fully analyze all the phenomena. If we speak about each indicator, each of the 6 indicators, we analyze. So the indicator 1, which is related to the legal framework, there was no major challenge in the description of the legal framework. However, there was a general lack of information on the implementation status and challenges observed at the national level. Only to explain, during this part of the presentation, each slide presents the table for each indicator. Well, this one was much larger, but we present here only the 3 of them. As for the indicator 4, which was related to the proportion of seats held by women in governments, we received information related to 2020, in some cases also 2021. However, we had some difficulties to collect data, especially regarding local governments from 2016. As for the indicator 5 related to women's presence in managerial positions, well, here we had we met strong challenges in obtaining data, basically related to all the aspects, to all the sub indicators we were asking for. So not only the presence of women in companies, but also in media, in science, in the security sector, and in diplomacy, which basically also demonstrated that there is a strong need for a national dialogue between different institutions that gather this data. As for the indicator 7 related to women in formal and informal work, the major issue was related to scarcity of information on informal work, and we had difficulties to obtain data for the sub-indicators disaggregated by sex, age, disabilities, migrant status, and rural or urban area. As for women's entrepreneurship, we also noticed important difficulties to obtain this kind of data, especially for the sub-indicators, which related to the percentage of population of female population who are entrepreneur or owner manager of a business, and as for the number of new women's companies owners during the reporting progress. And as for the last indicator related to intimate partner violence, we also noticed difficulties to collect data. We had especially official data, but as we know, they show only the top of the iceberg. We also need additional sources for collection of this data. And another issue was related to different definitions of this violence, of who is a partner, and of course how they are collected. So as for lessons learned and recommendations, first of all, we have to stress that without an accurate image of the situation, it is impossible to adopt efficient measures. And on the one side, it is necessary to include the gender perspective in all data gathering processes, and on the other, there exists an urgent need to unify the nomenclature and data gathered among the UfM member states. So data should be gathered regularly, and the UfM Secretariat should coordinate this regional work. Data gathered by sex, age, disability, etc. are almost inexistent, and this situation has a very negative influence on women from vulnerable group, as simply they are invisible to the public eye. And in order to create fully inclusive public policy, it is thus important to make further efforts in production of data that include the aspects mentioned before. So Thank you very much for your attention. And now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Sharon Maher from the National Institute Council of Women in Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for the invitation, and I'm very honored to be with you today, representing the National Council for Women in Egypt. My name is Sharon Maher. I'm working as International Cooperation Specialist and the focal point for the UfM in the Council. I've been working for this file since 2020 with the beginning of the preparations for the reporting exercise. So I worked personally on filling the report template. During my intervention, I will go through two specific points. The first one is the challenges we faced during the reporting exercise in terms of data gathering and what is our suggestion to mitigate these challenges in the next report that will be covering the rest of the 14 indicators. Our main challenge was the tight time constraint to collect the required data, as the report contains many aspects and many sections, and every section is covering many aspects. And indeed, the report attempts to cover almost every aspect to be inclusive and to provide insightful vision for the women's status in the member states of the Mediterranean. So in order to give accurate and recent data, in some parts, we needed to approach the concerning entities to provide us with the latest statistics and in the requested formatting. And as you know, for the sake of reliability, the source of data must be a national, although that some international reports might provide us with the requested or required answer. So actually, this was our real issue. And maybe that is why we sent the first draft beyond the deadline. So we suggest that to mitigate this challenge, it could be through giving sufficient time prior collecting the reports, and also maybe to agree on a non-exhausting reporting format that may enable each country to fill the required data smoothly. Specifically, that the 6 segregated data on some specific topics can be considered as newly introduced and not common till the last few years. My second point is the good practice for data gathering. So one of the recent successful data gathering practice was Egypt's response on women's status during the outbreak of COVID-19. Egypt was the first country globally to issue a rapid response policy toward women's situation during the COVID-19, and was the first globally to issue a women policy tracker. Actually, 5 editions were launched. We worked on specific segments, including women at reproductive age, women with disabilities, elderly women, and women with specific health conditions. Then we set specific pillars to introduce the suitable measures for them. Started from March 2020 to January 2021, Women Policy Tracker has tracked 165 policies, measures, and decisions taken by the government of Egypt that are considerable to women's needs. By the end, there were 21 measures issued, like exceptional leave for working women, conditional cash transfer expansion, increase the monthly income for rural women, and so forth. Another example for successful data gathering. One second. Actually, is Egypt's Women's Observatory. It's a website aimed at following up the implementation of women's status targets from 2015 to 2030 through the following points: complying and displaying the indicators values on an interactive website, preparing a set of periodic reports on the status of women, of Egyptian women and the gender gap, listing and presenting laws related to women. The time series for indicators starting from 2015 or from the last available base point are displayed as a base year. The observatory provides the comparisons between the status of females and males by presenting indicators for males and females. The observatory also highlights the gaps between different regions by presenting indicators at district and governorate level when available each of the four pillars. The observatory allows the comparison of the current status of the target to determine the extent to which the target level of each indicator have been met. Quantitative targets for each indicator have been established in 2020, 25, and 2030, which helps to assess the plan and the programs being implemented and their ability to achieve the targets. It's worth mentioning also that we have launched the study on women with disabilities 2 days ago, and the full study will be released soon on our website. Also, we are about to conduct a national survey on FGM in collaboration with our partners from the UN. So besides the national level, on the implementation level, we have here in the National Council for Women, we have customized internally AIM&E system that is grounding on gathering data segregated by sex. So the mechanism from the early beginning is tailored to facilitate the reporting process afterward. Also, it's worth mentioning that that's all. Oh, it's our reports and publishing are uploaded on our website, and I will drop the link in the chat box now. So everyone can have access on our publishings and all the reports and fact sheet of the National Council for Women. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much for this presentation. And now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Christina Carletti, senior expert on gender issues from Italy.
Thank you very much, Iwa, and good morning, all the participants, dear Ambassador, Deputy Secretary General, dear Co-President, Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me express the Italian appreciation for the really timely and precious work. First of all, this work has been very important also for all the membership of the Union for the Mediterranean. And I take this opportunity also to thank the Secretariat team professionality and support in the path towards the compilation of the second regional progress report on women empowerment in the Euro-Mediterranean region. In my role of gender focal point for Italy, it is my pleasure to share with you some considerations concerning this first step of the data gathering activity and related analysis, starting from the indicators that Anna Doran-Gricchi has introduced and that have been completed very precisely by Iwa Wedlak just some minutes ago, and to share with you some national good practices in line with the Union for the Mediterranean investigatory approach on the empowerment of women and girls in our Euro-Mediterranean area. With your permission, I would share my presentation so that it will be probably very useful to have an idea about how we have contributed to this very interesting exercise. So first of all, we have clearly known that we have in common key legal standards, not only able to promote and protect rights and freedoms of women and girls Iwa before mentioned the CEDAW Convention, but of course also for the European countries, it is important to mention as far as GBV, the Istanbul Convention that we have celebrated in the last 2 weeks. And we have paid great attention to the concepts and to the definitions. We have started I think, of course, of the Union for the Mediterranean entire membership by defining 2 basic concepts that should inform our progress about knowledge concerning gender policy at large, so mainstreaming and empowerment, since the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and the platform for action that we have updated in terms of commitment for data gathering and monitoring the state of the art as far as the implementation of the contents of the declaration and the platform for action some years ago. So starting from the mainstreaming, we know very well that is a general approach aimed at paying due attention to the impact of decision-making processes on women and men among our relevant indicators that we have studied in the last year. And the second concept, very important and complementary, to be studied in a complementary manner with mainstreaming, is the empowerment. It means an operational dimension to overcome all the obstacles to full participation of women to social, cultural, economic, and political life in a country. Starting from the first one, mainstreaming, of course, it is important to mention our indicator 1, country commitments to gender equality. And here, also being informed by the common exercise that we have received in the UfM context. We have introduced a specific attention to the indicator 1 performance in the our recent national strategy for gender equality that Italy has adopted in last July, and that covers the period 2021-2026. The core ambition of this national strategy, because we are active part of the European Union framework, is to gain 5 points in the EGE Gender Equality Index in the next 5 years to outperform the European average by 2026 and to be among the top 10 European countries in 10 years. And to pursue this very impressive ambition, 5 strategic priorities have been defined in the strategy, one for each gender equality pillar, to outline and guide our governmental action at very different levels, starting from the central until the very local one. The 5 strategic priorities refer to employment, income, skills, time, and power. Within this national strategy, we have introduced a set of indicators to measure key factors of gender inequality. And for these indicators, a target value has been also specific and measurable goals to be achieved. All indicators have been selected among those that are yet in place and that have been used by various official sources, such as some concerned ministries. Here I mentioned the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Research, but also we have referred to European and international institutions sharing with us very useful indicators. The OECD is among the international organizations that we have referred to. And of course, statistical institutes, not only the National Institute of Statistics of Italy, but also Eurostat and UISPES, and some trade associations, in particular Unioncamere, for the performance indicators concerning the role of women in the business sector. And for us, the regional report exercise carried out by the Union for the Mediterranean has been and will be taken into the account in this process. So it means in the implementation of our national strategy in the forthcoming years. The second concept is empowerment. And of course, I refer to all the indicators that we have started studying upon in this first path of the Union for the Mediterranean activity. In particular, at the national level, empowerment was mentioned as the core concept on the occasion of the G20 Italian presidency, and in particular during the G20 Conference of Women Empowerment that has been held under the Italian G20 presidency and hosted at the end of last month of August. In particular, the regional report exercise by the Union for the Mediterranean has been carried out in parallel. So while we have prepared this G20 conference, so it has been very useful for us, especially for a mutual data exchange to set the scene for the compilation of the basic materials that have been, of course, prepared and shared with all the representatives of the G20 countries during the working activities and session of the conference, and that have been used also to promote the international debate in this fora. In particular, the issue of women's empowerment has been placed at the core of the Italian presidency of the G20. So not only in this conference, but also in the debate in the various working groups and ministerial meetings, because it is a cross-cutting issue. In particular, the G20 conferences held in Santa Margherita Ligure represented a synthesis of these thematic debates and of the perspectives from different actors, such as the engagement groups of the G20, the civil society initiatives carried out during our presidency, and the business debate over the role of women in the business sector. And against the worrying pandemic, and we are facing, of course, a post-pandemic scenario, we know that the G20 conferences has been very much appreciated to be considered as a forum for a discussion focused on promoting an inclusive and sustainable economic recovery consistent with the Sustainable Development Goals set out in the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This said, so starting from these two very key concepts for our work at the national level, but also in the Union for the Mediterranean setting, let me stress some points. Great appreciation, of course, for this very comprehensive and detailed work we have carried out in the Union for the Mediterranean setting to collect quantitative and qualitative data and to translate them into a proper formal regional report, both in a comparative and country perspective. Of course, this exercise has led us to not only update national efforts over gender issues, but to reinforce these efforts together with our partner, that is the National Institute of Statistics, the Italian ISTAT. Data collection and analysis carried out at the national level for Italy should take into proper account, of course, the EU statistical methodology to explore our societies under the gender lens. So we have to refer, of course, to basic European Union methodology to explore this very complex topic. But for sure, as we have experienced our efforts, and we have provide strong commitment for the first phase in order to take notes and to proceed in the implementation of the concerned recommendation, we have for sure the intent to renew this support also in the forthcoming analysis concerning future indicators, as Anna has mentioned before. Let me mention on one national good practice as requested in this session. I refer to indicator 11, so the indicator concerning the commitments from member states to combat and prevent violence against women and girls from their intimate partners. Of course, violence is one among the main key obstacles to the achievement of gender equality and the full empowerment of women. And in our view, in the national Italian view, empowerment is essential in building more powerful and conscious dimensions for women, shaping an autonomous capability to protect themselves from all forms of violence. So far, promoting the empowerment of women and girls is fundamental, not only to develop their talents in the process of health, economic, social, and cultural recovery and resilience, but also to prevent and combat all forms of violence against them. And in our intention, women's empowerment is a precondition to support victims of violence financially. It means strengthens their economic independence and making them in the conditions to be free, really, from fear and able to bring their added value to our societies. As far as this indicator, the Department for Equal Opportunities at the Prime Minister Office of Italy has worked closely with the National Institute of Statistics, in particular during the pandemic, for collecting data through the helpline 1522, data that have been collected in the database of this helpline from March to June 2020, so at the very outbreak of the pandemic, that have been data supplemented by an update for the second semester of last year, and for this year, the report released by Istat has been published recently, concerning also the opportunity to compare data as far as last year and this year. Information collected has provided important evidence over the trend of domestic violence, especially domestic violence, unfortunately, during the pandemic, due to the request for help and the response from anti-violence centers and shelters throughout the national territory, Italian territory. For us, data are a precondition for a broader analysis of the phenomenon to address difficulties in understanding, prevent, and countering it, often due to the fear of women and girls to denounce their perpetrators. In particular, this point, it means the partnership with the National Institute of Statistics has been included in our new National Strategic Plan on Male Violence Against Women that covers the period 2021-2023, that has been recently passed by the Italian government and which will have permanent financial resources for its best implementation. The plan is based along some activities in terms of prevention, protection of victims, prosecution of perpetrators of violence, training and education of operators and the population at large, information and awareness, recovery of abusive men, protection of migrant women and victims of multiple discrimination, autonomy in work, economic and housing opportunities. In particular, in the plan, there is the priority 4.1 that refers to the opportunity to reinforce, to strengthen our national system as far as data collection. The priority 4.1 refers to the implementation of the integrated information system, that is the collection and analysis of data on the phenomenon of GBV and its various articulation. And the aim of this priority is to monitor the phenomenon of the male violence against women, identifying suitable tools for the collection of data, their reading and interpretation, and their reasoned dissemination. For the pursuit at our best, this priority, we have thought about strengthening statistical surveys on gender-based violence with the aim of increasing the frequency of the same surveys and the detail of information provided in these surveys. And furthermore, this priority encompasses also the promotion of all activities necessary for the conversion into law of the bill actually under debate at the parliamentary level, named Provisions on Statistics on Gender-Based Violence. So it is an important point to be stressed. I stop here, and I hope that this contribution from my side has let you the idea of what we have reacted very, very recently on in this specific process. But of course, I confirm our full commitment to proceeding to the work of the Union for the Mediterranean for the next step towards the declaration. I stop here, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Ms. Carletti, thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. And now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Outi Karkainen, focal point for Gender European Training Institution.
Thank you, Eva. I will share the screen. I'm sure you all love statistics, don't you? Can you see the slide well now? Better, okay, good. I think the data speaks normally for itself, so I would like to show you some basic indicators regarding women's economic participation. I work for the European Training Foundation, which is an EU agency supporting the reforms of education, training, and labor market or employment systems in Southern Mediterranean, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and Western Balkan. And this also includes, of course, monitoring of gender equality in this field of human capital development. So I have followed this UfM process more in the shadows and will bother you with some technical issues today regarding the data. Here you see the indicators regarding the women's participation in economic life that were created in 2020. Most of them will become relevant as the plan is to enlarge the monitoring process also beyond the 6 indicators that were the focus until now. The green ones are those that are also monitored by the platform, the regional dialogue on employment and labor, or labor and employment, I never remember in which sense, which met in Barcelona also yesterday. So there is some synergies between the 2 processes running in parallel, and this is why I have highlighted them here to show you the importance of 2 processes working along. The figures that I will show are for the neighborhood South countries, and for the Western Balkans and the EU member states that are on the shore of the Mediterranean. Unfortunately, in addition to Syria and Libya, we do not have the data or enough data, gender disaggregated data for Lebanon also. So Lebanon is not in the figures. I try to move, yes. So if we go look at the activity rates, here the distance between the squares and the triangles and the dots for 2015, and the 2 lines for 2020 show the difference between the female and male activity rates in one country. I hope you can see them. What we can see here is that there are not so important developments in this regard between 2015 and 2020. The gap between men and women, the gap, so the difference between the 2 for each country, remains about the same, except for maybe Malta, where the female activity rates rose during this period by almost 10 percentage points. And to some extent also Jordan, Palestine and Turkey, where the gap has been reduced not because of the increased female activity rate, but rather because the male activity rate has decreased. The ambassador already before mentioned some figures regarding the impact of COVID on women's employment in the region. And according to ILO globally, COVID in 2020 had an impact of reduction of or job losses, let's say, for women about 4.2% and for men 3%. In addition, in the ILO recent monitoring report, which they do periodically regarding the impact of COVID, what they notice is that in the countries where COVID has had a very strong effect on the employment overall, proportionally, it has even harder effect on women. However, what is let's say on the base of the figures we have today, we can say that the biggest impact, we cannot see it yet in terms of employment, but on the activity rates. So women's activity rates have decreased due to COVID because there are no jobs available, discouraged, no time as other home and care activities had to be taken care by women, and we know there are several reasons. So unfortunately for the region, we do not have the data yet to compare the 2019 and 2020 for all the countries to see really the impact from 2019 to the first, let's say, COVID year of 2020. Here you can see some of the data available for male activity rates and female activity rates comparing 1920, the white boxes showing where there has been a decrease. So what we can see here is that the activity rates decrease in most of the countries in question here for both sexes, and in particularly for women in the EU, European Union. So the average of the EU has actually decreased clearly. However, like I said before, we don't know yet the complete picture of the impact of COVID, and not the least because the pandemic is not yet over. I know you are all waiting for the coffee break, so I won't stay for long on the employment rate, and in order not to overwhelm you with the figures. But what we can see here is that there's a timid progress, let's call it timid progress, in the EU member states for female employment rate, but hardly any progress in the Southern Mediterranean countries or Western Balkans, except maybe in Bosnia Herzegovina. Now, when we move to unemployment, the figures are upside down. As you saw previously, we had the green line above and the circles above and the yellow and red beyond. So in no country, women's activity or employment rates are even close to those of men. But regarding the unemployment, women are the winners, so to say. And this in all the countries with the exception of Israel. What we can also see in this figure that in some countries like Algeria, Egypt and Bosnia-Herzegovina, the unemployment gap to the detriment on women has even increased since 2015. You see it by the further distance of the two lines, which do not follow the same trend, indicating that the unemployment rates cannot be attributed only to economic downturn, as proportionally the unemployment rates have increased for women, but not for men. So there are other reasons. Now, more specifically on the Southern Mediterranean countries, the education paradox. Unemployment rates increase with the level of education from low to middle and from middle to high, and in particular for women. It seems that the education does not pay off for women to the same extent than for men. This means that there must be other reasons not related to skills or education that hinder women entering the labor market even when they want to work. This is also related to loss of investment in education and the untapped potential that you discussed I think 2 weeks ago in one of the capacity building workshops organized by the UfM Secretariat. Last but not least, the needs rate. Needs. So young people that are not in employment, education or training. It tells us a lot about the situation, the difficulties, and even the hopes of our youth. And what we can see that the needs rates are almost always higher for women. You see the red triangle, male being the green square in this case, and the blue column being the total. With some exceptions, which you can see more in the EU member states, where they are pretty close to one each. The needs rates for male and needs rates for females. And what you can see also is that when the needs rate reaches 20% or higher, the gender gap increases considerably. Meaning, indicating the intersectionality of inequalities. So in a country where it's very difficult to enter the labor market when you're young, you're even more disadvantaged and discriminated when you are young and women. To conclude, I would like to show this image that we did on the southern Mediterranean countries on the basis of data in 2019, showing the proportions of working age population in these different categories, which I think is quite descriptive of the opportunities or the lack of opportunities for women. Unfortunately, we do not have this for all the regions. I think it would be very useful one day to make it for all the regions and make some comparisons also. As I said, this is food for thought and reflection, and to be continued, if possible, in other occasions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oti. Thank you very much to all the speakers of this panel. We heard some very interesting cases of good practices in the field of gender equality. The presentation of gender dimensions of employment was also very, very interesting. And we heard some propositions for improving the next exercise of data gathering and analysis, among them inclusion of the UfM reporting into the framework of the EU statistical methodology. We also spoke about timeline constraints. So think about having a more extended time for these exercises, and also about accepting less complete national reports in order to have at least some data. So thank you very much for these propositions, and I would like to give the floor to the participants of this meeting. Are there any suggestions or comments that you would like to share with us? Please do not hesitate to intervene.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you to all the speakers. Indeed, a lot of food for thought, as Oti was saying, not only in terms of data, but also in terms of methodology, in terms of improvement for the next reporting exercise. That would be really crucial for two main reasons. The first one, because it will cover a large number of indicators and sub-indicators, so it will even demand more efforts. From the other side, because we would like really to provide as much as possible input to improve and to boost, to strengthen the policy recommendations that we would like to include in the next ministerial. As I was mentioned at the beginning, the data on women economic empowerment, especially on employment, are key, and we will work together with the European Commission, DG Employment, in order to be sure that the data will be also helping in feeding the Ministerial Declaration on Employment. So thank you very much, Uti. We were discussing about it yesterday with your colleague here in Barcelona, with the European Commission, exactly about this. And one of the things that I would like to mention is that it's not only a matter of availability of data. As also Christina was mentioning, is a matter of coordination for data gathering, but also a matter of increasing the awareness about the fact that data gathering is not a simple reporting exercise. Data are needed to better drive the policy action, because lack of data can hide a lot of gender inequalities. And I would like to stress the fact that from one side, we are really, really grateful to all the countries, the 15 countries who participate to this first reporting exercise. I would say also that from MENA region, all the countries except Lebanon contributed to it. And for us, it's a very, very good indicators in terms of political commitment on it. So thank you very much. But from the other side, we would like also to push for next year, for next reporting exercise, to also the other countries to contribute, because this data will be helpful to improve the commitment, but also the implementation of these policies. And this is another element that I would like to stress. From one side, this data will be analyzed, but from the other side, we should ensure that this data will be used by the policymakers. And this will require to put in place also a monitoring mechanism in terms of implementation of the policies and of the commitment. Because from one side, as the ambassador stressed at the beginning, there are certainly a lot of progress made since 2016. But from the other side, especially in the last 2 years, and especially as policy responses to the COVID-19 crisis, also as mentioned by our colleague from Egypt. But from the other side, we will also to discuss next year, which is the better way and the better tools to monitor the implementation of these new policies and strategies. In terms of implementation, in terms of good practice, in terms of effectiveness, in terms of impact. This is not just an exercise for next year, but the idea is also to include in the ministerial declaration some policy recommendations about this specific need. And I'm looking in the chat if there is any comment from the public, but I have not yet received. So I would like also to ask to maybe Christina, Shiren, and Uti, if you have additional comment, because we will have 15 minutes more, sorry, before the coffee break. So if you want to add something, I can give the floor to you. Christina?
Anna, I take the floor as usual, just to complement some information that I have already shared and that are absolutely stressed by your side. It is important, the point of coordination. Indeed, if you think about our very recent exercise about not only the National Action Plan on Male Violence Against Women, but in particular the National Strategy on Gender Equality, as Shireen has mentioned, as far as the Egyptian best practice to create an observatory. We deem it very, very timely for the national exercise to create for the best implementation of our governmental commitments, but of course, believe me, all the commitments should be coordinated according to a public-private partnership. It means that we have already studied upon some very interesting and relevant indicators that should encompass a public and private participation to translate the knowledge, the statistical knowledge, into something practical that is more or less our national policies as far as gender equality, the promotion of rights and freedoms of women and girls, and the creation, the establishment of this observatory has been included in the National Strategy for Gender Equality, also including representatives from the statistical side, just to complement our governmental commitments, including the participation of all the stakeholders, the private stakeholders, starting from a statistical overview of the state of the art as far as the promotion of gender policies that are really important to translate the commitments into practice. So I think that the National Observatory will be absolutely an asset tool to not only explore and update and correct our statistical methodology, but to inform all the participants, public and private participants in this observatory on how to use the best the statistical information to introduce really useful measures. And I mentioned the priority 4.1 as far as the National Action Plan concerning the violence against women. But of course, believe me, we have put this specific attention on GBV, but of course, GBV is included in the National Strategy for Gender Equality. So it is part of the game, part of the topics to be explored statistically to let our governmental authorities, ministries in particular, those ones, if you think about, for example, our Ministry of Justice, but if we think about economic empowerment, I believe that, of course, the contribution from our Ministry of Finance will be absolutely useful. So that, according to the indicators that we have debated upon in the UfM framework, we could use this very important framework to have the state of the art, again, the overview about gender policies, and to support the best implementation of our commitments at the national level. So this is my contribution to reaffirm, to reiterate our intention to use this very impressive indicators framework that we have created in the Union for the Mediterranean framework.
Thank you very much, Christiana. Always useful and relevant contribution, and I really hope to keep working with you next year. Uti.
Yes, just a short comment on the ambitious indicators we have among the 20 indicators. Just an example of the proportion of time spent on unpaid domestic and care work by sex and age. We have this data for the EU. I think we have an intervention by Eurostat later on in the next session by Malvina. She knows better than myself the details. We have, thanks to EIGE, so the European Agency for Gender Equality, and also the other agency, Eurofund, which is carrying out surveys during the COVID period on the, let's say, life and work conditions of women and men and how they have changed. So there might be a lot of challenges in getting this information for all the countries because the data simply is not there. Just as a point of information, we at the European Training Foundation are currently starting discussions with EIGE and Eurofund whether we could replicate some of these EU surveys to a limited number of our partner countries, out of which Some could be in also among the UfM member states. So just to give you a flavor of what is going on behind the scenes.
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks a lot. Yes, indeed. I wanted to stress the fact that this set of indicators have been discussed in 2017 after the Cairo Declaration, and it's a result of a long process of discussion and debate, and they were adopted 1.5 years ago. So we are aware about the difficulty of concrete application of these indicators. And from the other side, we will have also to tackle the fact that these indicators were thought before the COVID-19 crisis. And this is something on which we will need to work in 2022. I'm happy to hear about the possibility to adapt some of the EU indicator also for Mediterranean region, and happy to discuss about this. And in some cases, is also true that one of the challenge that we will have is also this coordination of data gathering, meaning that, as mentioned also from the director of National Institute for Statistics in Palestine in a recent event organized from the World Bank to present their report on data for better lives, she stressed the fact that from one side, data are limited, but from the other side, the data are available often are requested from different sources of different organizations. So the major challenge is not only to provide data, but to provide them in a coordinated way. And on this, as also requested during the ad hoc working group meeting, the UfM is willing to coordinate more effectively with the European Data Information, with the European Commission, and with other regional stakeholders already working on data gathering to better coordinate this work. So thank you for raising it, because it's quite an important element to take into account for the next year. Shirin, do you want to add and comment something?
Yes, it's only one comment. No, actually it's two. The first comment is a comment that in some blank fields, it's out of internal bylaws and the provisions in the country. Like I'll give an example, like in Egypt, the financial independency for women starts from the age of 18. So anything before 18, I cannot give you any statistics on, because it's not there, you know. It's a very small example. Another thing I forgot to add is that the National Council for Women in collaboration with the international, with the Ministry of International Cooperation and the World Forum, Economic Forum, we launched a Gender Gap Accelerator. And this will work in two main pillars. The first one is promoting data and knowledge. It's now very clear, and we are aware of the importance, and it's a must to enhance the process of gathering data. We are working in Egypt on that as a priority. Okay, and the second pillar will be the impact of closing the gender gap on creating economic opportunities. So I think it will be very interesting to share soon the results and any reports on accelerating closing of the gender gap. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you very much for raising and mentioning also this initiative. And I've also heard that Egypt and Jordan are the two first countries in the MENA region who launched this initiative in collaboration with the World Bank. And indeed, it's a very good initiative because, Among the pillar, this part of data promotion and knowledge increase, it's one of the key elements. And from the other side, there are specific areas like digitalization, but even other that will be tackled. I see that there is a comment on the chat from Ana Lite from Institute of Women from Spain. She said thank you for the work done on the report. However, she would like to say that it has been stressed in the report that the gender stereotypes impede women from accessing to a leadership position, but they also impede females fully engaged into the labor market on an equal footing with men. Gender stereotypes are also behind horizontal gender segregation, equal pay, undervalue of women's work, etc. It would be great if the report also include a wider vision of the impact of gender stereotype and gender bias. And on this, I would like Eva to react because we have been discussing about this. So I give the floor to you, Eva.
Yes, of course. So Anna, first of all, yeah, it's a very pertinent comment. Actually, we put the recommendation on the fight against gender stereotypes in the cross-cutting recommendations. So I want to say we took into account the global aspect, the global impact that gender stereotypes have on women. If I compare with the first report published 5 years ago, there was a specific analysis on gender stereotypes, but it was decided, if I'm not wrong, in 2020, not to follow with the same structure, and this is why gender stereotypes appear in the whole report, but I want to say there is not a concrete chapter on this aspect, but of course it is something that is taken into account. And and this is why we were also speaking about the necessity of having more qualitative data, because we need them to properly assess and include this aspect in our work. So of course we will try to we include this recommendation as a cross-cutting recommendation, and for the next exercise we will try to include, if I'm not wrong, it is one of the indicators, but also to insist a little bit more on the necessity of having more qualitative research to complete the exercise. I hope that I answered to the question.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, it will be a cross-cutting issue, and we will see in the next session when we will talk about policy recommendations. There is also a specific focus on these aspects. Thank you very much, Eva. I don't see any other question on the chat. I want just to make a last reference before going to the break. Today and tomorrow, the Ministry of Women in Palestine is organizing a national big event to present the gender equality policies at national level. During 2 days, the main organization in the country, in the regional level, will discuss about the achievements in terms of gender equality. And indeed, tomorrow I will present the specific contribution of Palestine to this reporting exercise. Thanks for the invitation, first of all, but I mentioned it just to give another concrete example on how this reporting exercise carried out in the framework of the UfM could be helpful in terms of sharing data, but also stressing the need of this data coordination, because, data gathering coordination, because they are going to show how this exercise allowed also to Palestine to launch this coordination in terms of data gathering. So I understand that it is a voluntary mechanism, but from the other side, I would really like to stress the added value of being committed in carrying out this exercise, because it's not just for the UfM, it's for the full region, for the Euro-Mediterranean, and the possibility to have regional data is something that can lead the policymaker in adopting strategy at regional level. I would like also to mention that and stress what the ambassador was mentioning before, the fact that gender equality has been mentioned as one of the main priorities from the large majority of the ministry in the last regional ministerial forum 2 weeks ago in Barcelona. And all the policies that were mentioned, from environmental policies, energy policies, but also social policies, economic development, investment, trade, the dimension of more inclusive policies focus on youth and women has been like a leitmotiv in all the intervention. This confirms the fact that there is an increased awareness and acknowledgement about the fact that gender equality is a priority, not because it's just a knowledge that should be enough for itself, a matter of human rights, but because it's also an issue of economic development, social justice, and just transition in the framework of economic, financial, environmental, and health crisis. I don't see any other questions, so I would say that we can go now for the coffee break. Thank you very much to all the speakers. It has been a pleasure, as usual, to listen in you for your contribution. Thanks again. The stream in YouTube will stop here, and we will continue on a more restrictive webinar for those who registered to the event. Thank you again to all the participants who follow on YouTube, and see you in 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you.